and get ready to improve your anatomy. In this first chapter, we are going to take a look at the human skeleton. So the skeleton is the frame of our bodies. It's what holds it all together. So it makes sense to start with that. And this is also what most of the muscles are going to be attached to. So it's really, really important that we understand what the muscles are attached to so that we can draw them properly. But first, the purpose of this chapter is going to be to get familiar with the names of the major bones or bone groups, and also how to simplify them so that they are easy to draw. Of course, the body or the skeleton is made out of a really large number of bones, and we obviously as artists don't need to know them all. Most of them are going to be hidden under our skin, under our muscles, and we'll only be able to see a few here and there poke out, and those are the ones that we're going to pay attention to because they influence the silhouette, they influence how light reacts on our bodies. So we need to understand them to be able to draw and paint the body later on more accurately. Once we're done looking at the names of all those main bones, there's about a dozen that we need to look at. So it's not that many, and it's actually going to be really easy to remember. But all those bones are essentially going to be our what we use as our skeleton. So we're going to be able to kind of ignore the rest and just focus on those. And when it comes to time to draw, this is really what is going to affect our drawings. So, all right, before we can simplify and draw the skeleton, we need to actually know what it looks like for real. So this is it. So this is the human skeleton. As you can see, it's very complex, but we're going to start from the top and make our way down and look at all those important bones and important groups of bones that we need to be able to memorize. So starting from the top here, of course, we have the skull. We look at that already, so we're not going to really focus on that anymore. But going right down from there is going to be a number of bones here that are really important. And since this particular class is going to focus on the torso of the body, we are especially interested in those bones that really influence the shape of the torso. The first set of bones that we're going to take a look at are the clavicles. So these two bones right here. So those bones are going to really impact how the light behave on the surface around this area here. Especially once we attach all the muscles of the neck to those clavicles, and whenever a character is in a different pose, so let's say your arm is raised, how the clavicle deforms, or not deform, but how it follows that movement is also going to be really important in us being able to paint that region accurately later. So the clavicle is just kind of like, this really simple S shape, like flat S shape, and it's going to be a key component. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the name already. So there you go. The clavicle, really important. Right behind it, you'll have the scapula, which is this triangle-shaped bone that you have on your back. Again, this is going to be an important one because whenever this joint here, so whenever the joint of the humerus, which is this long bone right here for the upper section of your arm, whenever this moves up, it's also going to push up or down, or pull down the scapula and the clavicle along with it. So whenever you bring this up, you can imagine that this pointy bit here, the lower portion of the scapula, is also going to move. So that will definitely impact the back, the shape of the back, and how you paint the light on the back. So this is going to poke out of most people's back unless you're really, really, really muscular. But even in certain angles, this is actually still going to be visible, or at least it'll push the muscles that are going to be attached on it, and those muscles will be more visible in certain poses. So very important pair of bones, these two. Then right below that, attached here, well, we don't see the attachment here, but normally there's cartilage and ligament. But so like I've mentioned, this is the humerus. This is the main bone for your upper arm section, and a large number of muscles are going to be attached to this one. So this is a really important bone to remember. And then down from there, you'll have the one here that is closest to your thumb. This is going to be called the radius. And then on the inside, the one that's actually probably felt the most because it acts as your elbow is going to be called the ulna. So this is the ulna right here. As you can see here, this is going to be the little bump for your elbow when you bend your arm. Down from there, attached to the spine, right here is going to be the thoracic cage. So of course, everybody knows this under the name of the rib cage. So this is, you can use either name, but yeah, essentially the rib cage or the thoracic cage, this is this big shape right here. So it's a simple shape. It's a simple shape to remember. It's a simple shape to draw. Of course, you don't need to remember, the placement and the look of all these different ribs here. It's good to know how many there are. So there's most people, there's going to be 10 that are attached in the back and in the front to the sternum. This is going to be this bone right here. This is the sternum, and onto that bone is also going to be attached the pectoral muscle. So this is an important one. But so yeah, you have 10 bones here, 10 ribs that are attached in the back and in the front, and you have 2 more that are floating down here. So basically you have 12 on each side, so you have 24 ribs. And then down here for your pelvic area, we have the hip bone. So the hip bone is, we say the hip bone, but in reality it's a bunch of different parts that have their own names, but we're just going to simplify it by calling it the hip bone because that group here, that's what it is. And then so yeah, if we go down from there, we have the biggest bone in the body, the longest, and that's going to be called the femur. So this is going to be the first section of the leg, and then attached to the femur is going to be, again, a pair of bones. So you'll have the tibia, which again, it's probably a bone that most people know by its name. So you have the tibia, and then on the side here, you have the fibula. So the fibula is going to create your little bump on your ankle right here on the outside, and the tibia is going to create the bump on the inside. And the bump on the inside is always a little bit higher than the one on the outside. So just something to remember. And then in front, you'll have the floating kneecap that's there to protect this joint. And that wraps it up. So as you can see here, there aren't that many bones that we really need to focus on. It's a pretty limited amount. So we have the skull, the clavicles, the scapula in the back. We have the humerus, which is this bone here for the arms. Then on the inside, forming your elbow, you have the ulna. On the outside, closer to your thumb, you have the radius. Then you have your rib cage or your thoracic cage. All those ribs are attached to the sternum, which is this bone right here in the center, protecting your heart and your most vital organs. And then down here in your pelvic area, you'll have your hip bones, and attached to the hip bones are your femur, your tibias, and your fibulas. And that is going to be all the bones that we need to worry about. So now, next up, we're going to take a look at how to simplify those bones, how to easily draw them so that we can start attaching muscles onto them. All right, so far in the figure drawing class, we've seen how to draw a simple skeleton. So this as simple as it gets, right? And then this is going to be the way to push that a little bit further. So it's going to be a skeleton 2.0, if you want to call it that. And basically, we'll have a couple more indications on there so that we can draw those important bones that will definitely impact the surface of the body, and so that we can draw them accurately in proper perspective and in correct proportions, proportional to the rest of the body. So the main piece in here, the main component is going to be the rib cage, because everything attaches to the rib cage. Well, actually the pelvis as well, the hip bones as well, but the rib cage is going to be kind of the one unit that we use to create everything else. So the main unit of measurements. So looking at it from the front like this, it's a pretty obvious shape. If you just blur your eyes with the scapula included in the back here. So what we can easily trace by looking at this is going to be a nice little square right here. So if we start at the tip of the clavicle and close that box, we get a square that's almost perfect. So it's not a perfect square, a little bit longer than it is wide. This is going to be our unit. So this is what we are going to use to draw pretty much, well, everything else, right? So this is the unit right here. And then what we can do to get the other section, the other part of the torso, well, we can just duplicate that box. So we're going to have two boxes like this. And so what we're left with is this, this big blue rectangle. And this is going to be the entire torso. With this, it makes things super easy to draw everything else. So I'm going to take a look at the legs first, which might be a little bit strange, but the legs are going to, if I undo that movement here, you can see the socket here for the femur is going to be right at the corner of that box. So it lands like really, really nicely there. So this is going to be where we place that first ball. So that first joint is going to go right here in the corner. So we can draw a big joint because it's a big bone. So this is going to be kind of the average location for that hip joint. And this is kind of the average. I say the average because there's male and female, and the hips are a little bit different for both. So in the case of females, the hips are always a little bit wider. And so that joint here for female might actually be a little bit more outside. So for to draw it a little bit more accurately, it might actually be more like this for female, right? But it's very, very close regardless. So in this case here, the femur would also be oriented a little bit differently. So it would be more like this instead for female. So this should still work for the majority of the characters that you would draw. So of course, you can push it out a little bit more to exaggerate the female features, or you can push it in even more to exaggerate the male features, you know, whatever. This is a good average. So we have the location here for our first set of joints. And so for the shoulders here, it's going to be right outside of the box. So it's not going to be the corner here. It's going to be right outside like that. That's going to be the rotation point. So it's going to be a little bit wider, for male, like you can see here. So this is more of a male skeleton. And for female, like I said, you know, if you want to draw the joint here outside, well, that joint should be as wide as your shoulders, which should be a little bit more accurate for female. Either way. So moving on from there. So of course you'll have the neck that will attach right here at the top of the box. But I keep saying a box because this is actually a box, right? It's not just a flat square or a flat rectangle. If we draw in perspective, it's actually going to be more like a 3D rectangle. So something like this. So you would have your joints here kind of right in the center on the outside for your shoulders. This one will be kind of hidden. And you would have the other ones here for the legs, right? So something like this. And then you would have the separation in the center here, which would be the separation between the torso area and the hip bones. Now that we know that we're dealing with a simple shape like this makes things really easy to deform. This makes things really easy to draw in perspective, right? So we all know at this point how to draw a rectangle in perspective or a rectangular box in perspective. So pretty simple. We can draw this from any angle pretty easily. And so that's the goal here. So we start with a super simple shape like we've done so far with the first anatomy class. And from there, we start adding on the details. We know that this box here will likely bend quite a bit here at the center portion here. So if we want, you can split that in two different boxes. So you would have kind of, you know, it's like two boxes on top of one another. So if this one bends, for example, and then you would have this one box here kind of tilting forward, and that would be the equivalent of the torso kind of just bending forward, right? So super simple. We can do that in any direction to just recreate the different movements of the torso. So now that we have our box for the torso, now we're going to place the clavicles onto that box. So the basic shape for the clavicle is actually really simple and quite easy to remember. It's like a bow. So this shape here is going to be the shape of the clavicles. And of course, in the center here, you'll have a gap to make way for the sternum. So we'll have something like this. So seen from the top, it would be about this shape here. So what we can do with this part here, the top portion, the front of the clavicles will land right on the outer side, the front side of that box, and the tips right about the halfway point here if we split that box in half. So there we go. Now, if we are to draw the clavicles or that bow shape, well, we start from the sides here where the joints would be. So we can first, draw just maybe a nice oval. So something like that. And then we can start to just curve kind of like the bit a little bit. the other extremity to get that bow shape back. Something like this, right? And then of course now we can erase kind of like the center portion here to make way for the sternum. And well, we would be left with our clavicles. So a little bit bigger. Clavicle number 1, clavicle number 2. So there we go. So it would be this shape here, and then this is just basically a big cylinder. So if we draw this a little bit bigger, even, it would be just kind of like this shape right here. All right, so that would be this shape right here. So just a long deformed cylinder shape. So pretty simple to draw. All right, next if we move on to the scapula. So the scapula is going to be another one that's actually pretty easy to draw. And if we look at it from the side here, from the back view here, what we can see is a pretty obvious triangle shape. So this is going to be the shape, the basic shape that we go with when it comes to drawing the scapula. And also what's interesting to note is that at the top here, this edge of this triangle also shares the same line with the clavicle, meaning that it's going to be on this plane right here as well. The top side of this big rectangular box here is going to be the canvas for the scapula as well. So what we can do now, if we look at it from the top view here, well, we can start to see a diamond shape show up. So we'll start from the sides here, so from the joints, the green balls, and then we can trace a line following the same line as the scapula themselves. And then what we're left with is the side of a half diamond shape. And so we can trace the same thing now for the clavicles. So we follow the clavicles like this, and we're left with a nice diamond shape. So with this in mind, well, we are going to trace the top line for the scapula triangle here in blue. So as you can see here, it stops about at the halfway point from that side of the diamond shape. So we'll have kind of like these two lines here. So now we can use the box here to retrace those lines. So if we start from the corner, we go in the center here, same thing on the other side. Now we can take the halfway point and draw on those blue lines that indicate the top of the scapula. And then from there, it's just a triangle that goes about to the halfway point of this box that we have for our torso, right? So it would go about down here. So if I cut this box in half to find out where that other edge of the triangle, that other end of the triangle should go, what I can do now is just maybe split that entire line, the length of that side here, cut it in quarters, and then you can take the first quarter here and then join the dots. So from that angle, the scapula would look something like this. And then from this angle, again, it would go all the way down to this edge right here. So something like that. And this should give us a pretty good idea of what the scapula should look like for for this person right here in that particular angle. So of course, the triangles don't seem like they're the same size, but they actually are. It's just this one here is in a weird angle. So this is how you draw the scapula. So it doesn't have to be, that bottom edge here doesn't have to be placed perfectly, really. It just has to be kind of, going down. If you split this box in half, it's kind of like a slice of pizza that's going down, but not quite straight down. So it has a little bit of a tilt to it. So, kind of like this, as if it's pointing towards the pelvis instead of pointing straight down. So there you go. That's how you draw the scapula. So the top edge of their triangle shares the same plane as the clavicles. Basically, that's what you have to remember. Now we're almost done when it comes to the skeleton. There's just a couple of things that we need to adjust. So our torso here, this is not actually gonna do it quite well. So if we take a look at the side view of a character here, the side view of the skeleton, well, there's a couple things that we need to adjust. Obviously, if we try to trace that box on top of it. So from the front, it works great. But from the side, we're actually going to introduce a little bit of a curve or a tilt to those two boxes here. So they're not going to be just laying on top of each other like they are right here. So if we trace the same box here onto the skeleton here, well, the top of the box here is the clavicles. So we know that the top of the box is going to be right here, and the back of the box is going to be where the spine is. So right where the spine lands right here. So we can go down, trace that box, and it goes all the way down to the joint right here. And so from the side, the box that we've drawn is going to look like this. It's going to be this region here. But of course, you know, if we look at the skeleton itself, it's not quite accurate because the rib cage here pokes out. There's going to be a little bit of the hip bones here that pokes out as well. So to remedy to that situation, what we need to do is, instead of having that box go straight down, we just need to give it a bit of a tilt. So we're going to tilt that box slightly forward instead. So it's going to be, we can start with the same guidelines, right? So it's going to still be that shape and that thickness. But instead, the box is going to be tilted forward just a bit. So this would be a better representation of what we actually have. So it would be two boxes like this, split in the center. And then, of course, we can further refine this to make it a little bit more accurate and to help us later in the later stages to attach the muscles onto these boxes more properly, so more accurately. So what we're going to do here is that since we can notice that the hip bone actually only occupies about half of this entire box here that we've drawn, well, we can split that in half. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to cut that bottom box in half. So this one right here, chop it in half right there, right down the middle. And then we can kind of eliminate the top portion here. So everything that's above that box, everything that's in between here, we can get rid of it. And of course we can leave the spine in there because that matters. But essentially it's going to be half a box for the pelvic area. And now with this new position, you might be able to notice a change I will need to do on that basic model here that we drew initially. And it's that the new joint, the new location for the joint is going to be at the corner of that box instead of being down the center. The top box here, not going to change. So we're going to keep it exactly the way it is. As you can see here, the shoulder joint is a little bit offset compared to the hip joint. As you can see, they don't line up perfectly. So we're going to keep the top one here. This one is not going to change. So everything we've done so far just stays the same. The main thing that we need to change from now on, since we oriented that box, that lower box differently, we just need to readjust the location of the joint along with it. So the new joint is going to be at the corner of that box right there. And the shoulder joint is still going to be right down the middle for this one box here. All right, so now we know how to position the torso in space with two simple boxes. So very simple stuff. Now we know that we just need to tilt it a little bit like this so that you get kind of like this bean shape, right? So this slight bean shape. Now seeing it from the center here, there's just going to be a couple of things that we need to adjust on for that box here to help us kind of draw the rest of the muscles on top. So the rib cage here at the bottom just curves inwards, right? So we're going to soften that side of the box here. So we're just going to erase kind of like the corners like this to get a kind of like a cup shape, right? So starting from the side here, you get this nice cup shape. And then for the pelvic area, we can pretty much leave it the way it is. So we're not going to change anything there. So it's still going to remain a box. And now going back up here, when you have that cup shape, well, what you need to do is just take the halfway point of this entire new shape that you created, so the cup, and at the halfway point here, place a dot, and then we're going to just take a pizza slice off of this whole thing. So as if you were chopping or cutting a slice of pie or something like that, or a pizza, whatever, and take it out. So you would be left with something like that. And that would be a lot more accurate. So now, why is this something that we need to take into consideration? Well, we really need to have the location of the sternum here. So this is going to indicate a whole lot of things. So it starts at the top of the box and goes all the way down to when the box starts to open up like this. So when this little thing here starts to open up its mouth. So if you can think like it's a fish or something, because this line here at the bottom of the sternum is going to be the indication for when for where a lot of the muscles attach to. So this is going to be the indication for where the abdominal muscles attach to. This is going to be the lower end of the pectoral muscles. So there's going to be a lot of things that we can derive from this one indication here, this one guideline. So it's very important that we add that on top of our skeleton. So, give your skeleton kind of like this nice little red tie. Now with this, we should have a really good start for our skeleton. So again, that sternum here that we drew, it would go something like this and go all the way down to the halfway point right here. Maybe a little bit lower, so just slightly lower than the halfway point. But we can just say that halfway point for simplicity's sake. Now, what's left? So the only thing that we need to take a look at now, the one thing that's left is going to be those joints here. So those major joints for the arms and for the legs. You will see the wrist joints and then the ankle joint when we get to drawing the feet and the hands in the last class on anatomy. But for now, we're just going to focus on the knees and the elbows. So when it comes to the legs and the arms, one way to simplify those limbs is going to be this way here. So the first part here, so the femur and the humerus, those are going to be just simple cylinders. So very simple. It's going to be just a shape like this. But then at its tip, when it connects with the forearm bones here, well, it's going to widen a little bit, and then this is actually going to turn into a cylinder. So it'll be this shape right here. So it's a cylinder, and then it turns into a perpendicular cylinder. So you'll have a cylinder like this instead. And so this is going to be kind of like the base shape for the upper section of the arm, for the humerus. Now the forearm section is going to be, instead of a cylinder like this, going to be more like a plank. So it's going to be wider like this. And since it is wider here, it's going to have the ability to twist. And that twist would look something like this. So this is only possible thanks to the fact that we have two bones in the forearm. So the radius, which is going to be the one right here closer to the thumb, and in this case would end up twisting like that. And the ulna, which would be the other one here, the one on the opposite, and you would have a twist like this instead. So by them twisting like this and overlapping, well, we are able to get this additional range of motion with the hands. The same thing is going to be true for the feet as well. This is why we have two bones, to allow our feet a greater range of motion. So when drawing it, just think of this whole plank as a plank that can twist along its length. And then the way that this plank is going to attach onto this little this cylinder here, well, this is going to be kind of what I like to think about here is a kind of like a snake biting onto that cylinder right here. So something like that. So it would be kind of like the snake head, and then the snake would kind of just blend onto the plank, or kind of just like a snake or like a spoon, whatever you want to call that. But you can imagine, the snake with the two little eyes like this, biting onto the cylinder. And so this would be the your elbow, and that would be the bump created by the ulna. So in reality, this snake head or that spoon, whatever, this should actually be a little bit offset. So it shouldn't be down, should be right in the center, should be a little bit closer to your pinky. So we'd have to slide that over just a little bit. So this would be a good representation of this particular joint. Now the knees, well, those are a little bit different. So you'll have the same base. So the same base as this one right here. but then the tibia would also be very similar. So that's kind of like the main difference. So instead of having a plank like this, well, you would have kind of the same thing, but mirrored over. And then on top of that, of course, you would have the kneecap, and the kneecap, you can just simplify it by just drawing kind of like this big oval. So that would be just a shape that's just floating on top of those two cylinders. And it's going to be a little bit, it's going to poke out a little bit more around this area right here. And then this area here is going to be recessed a little bit more. But this is pretty much the shape, right? So if you bend your knees, well, you would still have the same kind of setup here. So that wouldn't change too much. The main thing that would change basically is just the muscles around it and how they wrap around the knee when the knee is bent. But the joint for the knee is not supposed to be as movable, as flexible as the one for the elbow. And you can test that on your own by just trying to rotate your feet all the way to the left as much as you can. You can move your legs too. Try to rotate your feet to the left and then to the right and see the kind of range that you get. You get about 90 degrees. And as opposed to your hand, if you place your hand facing up right in front of you and then you try to face down instead, you'll be able to do that pretty easily, which is, it's pretty much double the range of motion. And so there you go. So this is how you simplify all the major visible bones of the body. So as you can see here, it's pretty simple. We can easily deconstruct them into very, very simple volumes that we can then place in perspective and reconstruct. Now, with this more advanced skeleton, we should definitely be in a good position to start adding on the muscles. So this is what we're going to do in the next chapter.